All right. Good morning, or afternoon, or evening, whenever you're listening. We are live this morning. My name's Jackie Broman. We are going live with a guest webinar today. We're lucky enough to have Rosa Racco with us from WR Law over in Bendigo, an employment law specialist. And today we are really focusing on all things that have arisen in 2020. Pandemic and also otherwise. So what you need to know from what's arisen this year and moving forward. So Rosa, great to have you.
Hi Jackie, thank you for the invitation. It's lovely to be here. And I want to introduce Anne Conway. People can see Anne. Anne has joined the law practice as a HR specialist. So Anne's got, I don't want to make her sound old, but I think she's got about 20 or so years of experience in HR and has been the HR director of big companies with 1,000 employees. So I'm delighted to have her on my team. And as part of what we're doing, we're going to actually be launching we have launched, maybe we'll launch today, an HR consulting arm of the business. So we'll be able to be the one-stop shop. But I'm not here to talk about that today. What I'm here to talk about today is transitioning back to business as usual. I mean, this year has been pretty ridiculous, and now people are starting to go back to work in different ways, although our friends in Melbourne aren't as lucky as that. They're all still locked up at home. So Anne very kindly put together a little booklet that's on our website to help people with this transitioning, and I've made a PowerPoint presentation out of that booklet today. So everything, okay, thank you. Everything that is here you'll be able to find in the booklet, so don't panic because I've got lots of links and things. So I'll share my screen now if I can work out how to do that.
That's great and very exciting as well. Welcome, Anne. It's great for you. It's great to have a one-stop shop.
Is that shared now?
It is, yes. It's not full screen though, if you want to.
How do I get that?
It doesn't matter if you've got your little ones on the side.
It's very annoying. Doesn't. Why is it doing that? Oh, well, it doesn't matter. We're going to look at a bit of the background. We all know the background of what's been going on with COVID, but talk a little bit about why it's been so unprecedented. We're going to talk about some planning, communication, and then transitioning back to the workplace. Before I start, obviously, this is just for information only. It's not legal advice. And if you need legal advice for your particular circumstances, then please feel free to give us a call. But this is just for info. As we all know, I'm not having much fun with this today. As we all know, coronavirus started. That might be better for me. Is that shared still?
It has a little thing there saying resume slide share. Can you do that one?
Gracious. I'm sorry, guys. My technology is really not very good. You would think I'd done this so many times now that it would be perfect, but it's not. How's that?
That is perfect.
Right. As we all know, coronavirus has resulted in unprecedented circumstances worldwide. I mean, we think we have it tough here. I mean, I'm Italian and I've got family in Italy and friends in France, and I've got a French nanny, and she tells me where she comes from in France. There's got 10 million cases. She said 10 mil, and I thought she meant 2 mil, meaning two. She goes, no, 10 mil, 10 million cases. So it's been ridiculous, and I think we're sort of probably lucky that it hasn't been as bad. Well, not probably, we are lucky. But still, that's not to say that it hasn't affected us all really badly and terribly and in lots of different ways. Safe Work Australia has got some great information about the pandemic. It's had an unprecedented impact, of course, on the way people live and work. Australian workplaces of all sizes had to significantly modify their practices. It's been really interesting because some people have just, someone told me they're running at 220% of what they were running at last year. So they've just gone gangbusters, and others are running at 10%. So it's just been really distressing in different ways for everybody. It is a public health matter, and that's why we've had the very handsome medical, what's his name, the handsome doctor that gets on with the minister all the time. You almost make hearing about the pandemic a pleasure, but anyway.
Each to their own.
Always talking to us about, the risks and whatever. And Dan has been, I think, doing a great job, at least standing and fronting up every single day to talk to us about it. So, we're down to low cases though now. Although my husband did tell me that someone in Melbourne, someone who was associated with the Chadstone cluster, left Melbourne, travelled to Kilmore, infected people in Kilmore, then travelled to Shepparton and infected people in Shepparton. So I can understand why Dan gets so angry. If people just did the right thing, we'd probably be in a much better position. We've created a booklet, well, really the lovely Anne has created a booklet that provides a framework for assisting businesses to comply and getting back to work. And I want to say, if anyone's got any questions during, I'm happy to take questions on the fly. We can leave some questions at the end and we'll have a chat. And Anne will take some questions as well. So she buried her head in this for a couple of weeks. As well as information, it provides links to the resources, and we've done it like that so that it's always fresh, so the links are always updated by the government sites. It's current at the time of writing, and obviously you're encouraged to read the book in conjunction with the Department of Health website. Some of the resources include Safe Work Guidelines, Department of Health information for employers. So there's a lot of information at there, and it's a bit of an information overwhelm, I think, as well. But anyway. As we start to open up from the second COVID, which I think we're getting some more opening up at the end of the week on Sunday, I think, aren't we? Does anyone know?
They always say maybe. And I don't think for regional.
Okay, because I'm desperate to get out of Victoria for a while. Anyway. If this is the case and we do get it opened up again, then it's imperative that returning back to work is in as healthy a way as we possibly can for everybody. Otherwise, we'll have heaven forbid, a third lockdown. Employers may want to institute some health policies, things like temperature checks, mandatory doctor clearance. It's really tricky though. I went to a lovely seminar given by a barrister friend of mine, Joel Fetter, and this is some of his information that I'm using here today. And it's just really interesting to remember that health and safety laws pretty much trump everything. So particularly at the moment where we've got all the JobKeeper job stuff inserted, it trumps it trumps the Fair Work Act. The Health and Safety Act trumps the Fair Work Act. And it obliges employers to take reasonable care and obliges employees to cooperate. So there's obligations, positive obligations on employers and employees. But it's really controversial how far, and it's yet to be tested in the courts too much, but how far the OH&S laws can be relied upon to impose burdens on employees and in particular interfere with privacy. So, employers may want their employees to undertake certain tests or different whatever, and it's a breach of their privacy and how much right they've got then to push back and say, no, I'm not doing that. So it's going to be, I think, a little bit of a tension for a little while. Reasonableness will be the touchstone. And we've got to be careful not to discriminate with good intentions. I'll talk a little bit more about that later, but there was recently a fascinating case with BHP where they tried to protect Indigenous older workers and now they've got a class action against them. So there's been some changes to the OH&S legislation. I didn't know about this until I went to Joel's seminar. So the landscape is changing every day, and I don't know how employers are keeping up because me, who lives and breathes this every day, has trouble keeping up. So, but there's new regulations that have come into place and are effective from the 28th of July. They extend the operation of part of the Health and Safety Act and require duty holders to notify. So officers, as defined under the legislation, to notify WorkSafe if an employer becomes aware that someone engaged by them has a confirmed case, a self-employed person has a confirmed case, and the penalties are significant, up to nearly 40,000 for an individual and up to almost 200,000 for a corporation. So they're like massive changes and massive penalties. The regs are temporary, just as the changes to the Fair Work Act are temporary. The regs are temporary and they'll expire in 12 months, pending a review, obviously. And there's more information and instructions on WorkSafe's website. There's regulators now that go out. There's been 30, at the time I did this presentation, which was a few weeks ago, 30 companies have been investigated for COVID breaches. So the investigators have got very wide powers, just as they do normally with WorkSafe inspectors. They can just enter a place, and it's they've got, and the penalties, as I said, like this mirrors the manslaughter legislation, the new industrial manslaughter legislation. So if anyone dies because the employer has failed in their duty of care to provide a safe workplace, they could be jailed for 20 years and hit with a $16 million fine. I mean, that's just mind-boggling. So what we suggest strongly is to be aware of your obligations, and if you're not aware, make some phone calls and get aware, because you don't want to be having these, you don't even want to die, but you don't want these penalties either. I've got them here. There's more contraventions. Failure to meet the duties, you can be prosecuted criminally and can carry these sorts of penalties.
Your slides aren't moving on either.
They're not moving on?
Mm-mm.
Is that moving?
No.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Why is this happening?
You might be better not to have it on full screen.
All right. What will I have it on?
Just had it how you had it before with your side slides, so you can actually force it to move on.
Is that better?
It's not doing anything.
Oh, I'm so sorry, guys.
That's okay. We were happily just looking at your agenda and listening to you.
I went so much effort to prepare these slides. I'd like you to see them. Chris, can you give me a hand? Are you any good at this? I just can't seem to get... You can welcome. Okay, I'll keep talking. Well, the penalties I've got here are $1.5 million to $3 million for body corporate, $300,000 and or 5 years for a natural person. This is for breaches of the OH&S Act, and as I said, 16 million, 25 years jail for breaches of for manslaughter if someone dies. Employers must constantly reassess the available guidance. Like I said, it's just imperative at the moment that employers do that.
There's just so much to keep up with, like you said,
right.
Let alone the rules about when to wear stuff, who can be in what space and how many people you can have, and then to try and keep up with all the penalties or potential penalties and
I know it's that's what I was saying. I didn't even know about the work. Did you know about the health and safety regulations, Jackie, coming into force?
I didn't know that they'd been put in a required notification. No.
Yeah. Now my husband is come to try and get my screen
Tech support.
sharing. Tech support. It's not screen. It's not sharing. It's not big, and it's not sharing.
Where's your? It's read only. Where's your Zoom?
Over here.
So this one here you want.
Yep. Down the bottom down.
Mm-hmm.
Here.
Okay, great.
My lovely husband.
Yeah. If you leave it on that instead of going back to...
It says your screen sharing. It says it's live.
And is it... Okay. Can people see these resources now? And we're on the right screen? Great.
Yes.
I think so.
Excellent.
Okay. So the resources available, we've got for you, obviously the Safe Work. There's a WorkSafe checklist, and be chatting to Work Business Victoria. There's so much stuff. I mean, you couldn't possibly read it all. Anyway.
Yes, and if anyone watching this wants any of these things, they can by all means email myself or Rosa, and we can flick the links onto you directly as well, because that checklist from WorkSafe, particularly transitioning back to work, looks
great.
Probably one of the easier ones, maybe just a checklist. Yeah.
And our booklet will be up on our website this afternoon.
Right, we can share that as well. Yes, Anne?
Just wanted to say also that WorkSafe are proactively doing inspections of sites at the moment as well. They started doing this about 6 weeks ago to check people's COVID safe plans. So that's something just to be mindful of.
Mm-hmm.
Very mindful of.
Yeah.
Our booklet's in October. That's when we've done it. So, and as I said, the links will update automatically, so that should be fine. The policies, so when people are transitioning, you need to plan very well. So when people are coming back the workplace, there needs to be policies and procedures in place that relating to COVID. If demonstrating symptoms and employees are required to stay home, what are the leave arrangements? You need to work out what you can and can't do. If deemed to have had close contact with a positive case, what are the business requirements? And having a policy requiring employees to stay home if they're unwell. It's just funny things like I didn't, when people were home, homeschooling, I assumed they could access carers leave because they're caring for their children. But you can't, because carers leave for children only applies if they're sick. And they weren't sick. But if you then required someone to come to work if they had to homeschool, you're discriminating against them on the basis of their care responsibilities. So it's just so complicated that, you know, it's really, no wonder employers are really confused about what they can and can't do. So these are the sorts of things you can do, having a temperature check on arrival, consulting with employees about what's going to happen at work, briefing and training employees on all the new policies, having ongoing communication. Anne has focused on communication a lot in her presentation because I think that's really, really key. And a regular review and monitoring of policies and procedures because, as we say, it's changing almost daily. So you've got to make sure you're up to date and current.
Do you recommend that we do have a temperature check on people on arrival?
Oh, yes. What do you say, Anne?
Yeah, I think temperature checking is very valuable and just adds an additional precaution.
I've been in a couple of places and they don't record it though. They're just checking to see if you don't have a temperature. Is that sufficient?
I think so.
Yeah, I think again, having the records, then go back and you're actually able to substantiate it. Particularly if, you end up with a positive case, have they had COVID for just that day or have they had it for a week, who knows? Whereas if you've got that record, you're able to show a certain level of diligence.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
One of the key things that we've all been doing is working from home. So if, and I think the directive is still, if you can work from home, do work from home. Yeah. In Melbourne, they're obviously working from home. But you've got to do this, and again, it's very tricky because if you're working from home, that's technically a workplace. And so if you injure yourself working at home, you'll be covered, work cover will apply.
I know.
So it just gets more and more complicated.
I've had to get sit-stand desks for all my staff for home. Like, it's just another expense.
Yeah, that's right. And technology, not just sit-stand desks, it's the technology, printers, computers, all of that stuff. And also having an health and safety policy, like a working from home policy.
Yeah. On
our website and our resources, we've got an OH&S checklist for working from home.
Great.
That people, again, can go and have a look at. Again, I think it's been really tricky for lots of employers as well because it's about having a high level of trust with their staff. So it's important, I think, from the onset to discuss expectations and deliverables so that everyone's on the same page. I'm not across this as much as I should be, and I will get across it and put something on the website, but how much are you allowed to computer monitor your staff when they're home? And is that an invasion of their privacy? Yeah. So I might do a bit of research on that and pop something on the website. And it's also the support and maintaining contact with employees. Like, I've started to go out and have lunch with friends again, and you don't realise how crucial that is to your mental health, actually being able just to go out and sit in the sun and have a sandwich with some people. It's just been ridiculous. And so I think maintaining contact with your employees during that time in whatever way, whether it's a regular Zoom meeting, whether it's a regular whatever, if they're working from home, is really important. As we've got up here, stay up to date. If you can work from home, you must. And flexible work arrangements and social distancing. So this is like determine the risk areas in your workplace and conduct a risk assessment. Once completed, you'll be able to identify what control measures are practical. So it may be that the kitchen is a risk area because people congregate in there. So you might have to put rules in place that only one person at a time is allowed in the kitchen or something like that. So it's just really getting your head around where are like hotspots. Measures to consider: providing 4 square metres of space, enclosed spaces per person. Maybe other measures, splitting shifts. That's an interesting one. I've had one company, I can't remember who it was, but they've started people working at midnight and stuff, all sorts of different shifts so they don't bump into each other. But then that again has different complications. So they get penalty rates for working out of their normal ordinary hours, you know. So what would you say to that, Anne? Have you encountered that yet?
Yes, and it depends whether the staff are agreeable. There's some flexibility that allows that without the requirement for penalties. But my previous employer, we started the shifts 15 minutes apart, whereas prior to that we had 2 shifts. There ended up being about 10 shifts so that there wasn't that crossover of staff and to minimise the contact between the various departments. So that can be quite beneficial. And from a cost perspective, with penalty rates, there weren't any because the staff were very happy to have their wellbeing at the centre of the decision making.
Where I take the girls to school, firstly we have temperature checks, and secondly we're not allowed to stay and talk to the teachers or other parents. So they put those measures in place. You've got to drop your kids and leave immediately. And they've got staggered entrances to the school. Different entrances have all opened up and staggered times. So. Other measures: direct employees to stay 1.5 metres apart from each other. Put posters up. This was a good idea, Anne, to remind people. And I found it really interesting how Dan Andrews banned people gathering in homes. And, I think that was actually really clever because when you are in a home, you're more familiar with people. You're more relaxed. So putting posters up is a good way also just to remind people that, it hasn't gone away and you just need to keep doing it. Put floor markers. I know where I go to get my coffee, they've got all big crosses on the floor. Aldi's got big crosses on the floor where you've got to stand. And limit contacts, obviously, telephones, Zoom. I'd never really heard of Zoom until this year. Now it's all I ever talk about is Zoom. If premises are shared, either by the businesses or whatever, you may need to develop protocols like for lifts. I know I had to go to hospital earlier this year and they had a protocol of just 2 people in the lift at any given time. And just the risk assessment should be done as any other risk assessment is done at work. Resources to assist with social distancing, Safe Work Australia, fly in, fly out, driving in and all that. Department of Health, again. More. So much information, it's just overload.
So much.
Other requirements: ensure the workplace is clean and hygienic. So it's just little things like that. And you don't notice. Like I went out for lunch with my mum a little while ago and we sat on a table and Mum commented, I didn't even notice because again, we're not used to this world we're living in now, that the publican didn't clean the table before we sat down and people just left the table. There's just little things like that. So if you are in the kitchen and you touch the taps, clean the taps or have something there.
Yeah, and that's another thing, Anne, as well, just like we were talking about recording the temperature. Do you recommend that there's a record kept of how many times the common surfaces are cleaned in a workplace in a day?
Yeah, just in terms of protection for the business, it's a good idea to do that, or else you have a roster, and as long as you're sticking to that roster, I think that would be adequate. Just in terms of those common areas, what a lot of businesses have chosen to do is to remove any cutlery, etc., from there. So any communal cutlery, crockery, etc., has been removed, and it's very much reliant upon people to take their own items in. So that may be a consideration for some businesses as well.
Oh my God, I haven't even thought of cutlery. I've gotten rid of all the brochures in the waiting rooms. No brochures, no shared stuff, but cutlery. Okay.
You don't think of everything. It's just amazing. And I didn't know. I went to the hairdresser yesterday, hence my lovely hair today. But I asked for a magazine. No magazines in the hairdressers. Those little things. So here's more things. Put hand sanitizer just around in prominent locations. Display hand washing posters, regular communication just to keep reminding people, and that everything is really easily accessible to everybody.
Yeah, and I think, sorry, Rosa, with the communication, if you've got a multicultural workplace, remembering to have your communication in the various languages is also paramount anytime, but particularly now.
That's a great point, Anne, thanks. Where appropriate PPE, we're still all wearing face masks. Hate face masks. Loads of face masks. I put a picture of myself on Facebook yesterday with a face mask on at the hairdresser, complaining, not really remembering that all my friends in Melbourne can't even go to the hairdresser, so they were just all really depressed. They couldn't even go, so and I felt terrible. Okay. More resources. It's amazing, isn't it? But this is a case I want to talk about as well, and it's really a tricky situation because you want to identify and protect vulnerable employees. And they have been, these are the ones who are at increased risk of infection, of course, and vulnerable employees have been defined as Aboriginal Torres Strait Islanders, 50 years and older, with one or more chronic medical conditions, people over 65, people 70 and older, and people with compromised immune systems. I've got this case here. Here's the case. So this is the name, could ought to read it. And this is where the best intentions have gone awry. So BHP hired people through Manpower, a labour hire organisation. And a lot of these people were casuals as one of their mining sites. They're casual, as well as permanent people. So they had a nationwide program requiring mine workers who were part of the high-risk group to stay at home from early May. And this group included Indigenous workers in their 50s and non-Indigenous workers over 65. So any of who were employed directly by BHP or permanently were paid. Otherwise, they gave, I can't remember, I think it was $3 million to Manpower to pay the casuals, because if casuals are stood down, they don't get paid. But the money ran out. And so these workers were without pay for 3 months. So the union accused BHP of discrimination, breaching the legislation, because these people suffered loss because of their race, age and physical disability. And the first court date was the 9th of October. I forgot that. I didn't have a look as to what happened. But that'll be really interesting to watch. So if you're going to treat your vulnerable workers differently, please just make sure you don't discriminate. I think Anne's put some ideas on the previous here.
It's like what you said earlier, though, as well, because the OH&S and your protection of the vulnerable people trumps, or it should trump everything else.
Yes, you'd think so. But I think that what they did here, though, it's a good point. I think trumping it, you can direct people, but they have targeted certain groups. Like if they treated everyone and said everyone needs to, go home or work from home, but they've targeted certain groups. But it'd be really interesting to see the submissions and see how they defend that, because I'm sure that'll be BHP's argument and Manpower's argument.
Yeah.
But like Anne has said here, maybe it's better to do things like reassigning them to non-contact roles. And if they can't make any suitable or reasonable adjustments, leave might be the only alternative, which is what BHP did. But unfortunately, I don't quite know where the communication went between Manpower and BHP when the money ran out, what happened there. Because if they had a campaign, then they wouldn't be in trouble. It was the unpaid leave. And again, if vulnerable workers take leave, they've got to, again, they're probably very vulnerable in every sense. So the mental health, again, is an issue.
Yeah. And I guess another option is also to get them to seek medical in regards to whether they are going to be compromised if they're performing their normal job, because then you've got that to fall back on also if they are going to be compromised, where you can't have them in the workplace.
Look, I think it gets really tricky because you might even be able to direct them to have an IME, make sure they're actually fit to go to work.
Yeah.
So you can see all these laws just interlacing and impacting on each other, and I just think it's one of the most confusing times that's ever been in employment law at the moment for employers. This is lovely, Anne. This Harvard Business Review, 5 tips for communicating. You can talk to this, Anne, if you like.
Yeah, well, we really are in a crisis with COVID-19, and I just found this particular article was really useful and really does demonstrate the importance of communication anytime. But when we are in uncertain times, as we are at the moment, it's particularly important that we are transparent and we do provide empathy to our staff. The article, which there's a link in the booklet to the article.
I think I've got it on the next page. No, oh, I must. Sorry, it's in the booklet, isn't it?
Yes, it is in the booklet. It just provides all of the really common sense communication we should be providing to our staff so that they feel engaged, empowered, and know that we've got their best interests, as well as the businesses, of course, at heart. And also it opens up communication so that they can be giving us any feedback which can enhance any processes that we have in place.
And I like what you put here. It's, you know, ensures current, factual and relevant information is shared, you know, just to make sure that everyone is kept up to date. And I believe in one of the slides, you've even recommended sharing some of the financial position of the business with them so they understand what's going on, and it helps allay some of the anxiety around what might going to happen with the business.
And sort of as you indicate on this slide here, it's when people are uncertain and you haven't communicated, they usually automatically go to the worst assumption.
Yeah.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely, always. I don't know what it is about our human nature, but we always do it. Also, like a safe channel of communication, what was, you know, is a comfortable, safe panel. And I think your point about cultural difference is important here as well, because a lot of, you know, where Anne used to work, there's a lot of Korean, is that how you say it, Korean people?
Yes.
And I did a lot of work at this in uni because I'm of Italian background, and I just find it interesting that people communicate very differently in different cultures, and so you've got to understand how the message is going to get heard. There was a lot of research done years ago, and I was studying law about Aboriginals in court system and how they would agree to what was being said, because culturally they don't disagree or have conflict with someone who's more senior or superior to them in status. So there's just a whole lot of stuff to make sure it's a safe channel, it's private, it's confidential, and there's a variety of options where people can approach you about their issues or concerns, not just knocking on the door and coming in a very, you know, direct way. A lot of cultures don't communicate directly. You know, a lot of cultures communicate very indirectly. So, address job concerns. Like, people are really anxious about their jobs, and people have become amazingly more litigious. So, I was saying this to Anne yesterday, that the cases in the Fair Work Commission of unfair dismissals have gone up by 40% at the same time as last year. Because people are anxious, they've got no money, they've lost their job. So, you know, address any job concerns and address it early. Have open, honest and timely conversations, and provide a plan for the future. Let them know what you're planning with the business, with the job, with their jobs, and share as much information as possible and as viable on the business with them. More information.
That's that link.
Oh, is it?
To the article.
Yeah. Oh, good. There you go. I would talk about having visual representations around the place. People can, works they have a range of posters, do they? That you can download?
Yeah. Yes, they do.
There you go, signage and posters. I think we've all heard a lot too about mental health during COVID. I've mentioned it quite a bit this morning. And it's really important that you let your staff know that there is support and that you are supporting them when you need your own support. Because, you know, as a business owner myself, I found it incredibly stressful. You know, I had a huge downturn myself. I had a 90% downturn in the second, 90 downturn in August. We're all back up and going gangbusters again, but that's incredibly anxiety provoking.
Yeah.
Not just for me, but for my staff. They're sitting there going, well, what's going to happen to us, you know? So an EAP, provision of information relating to, you know, there's been a lot of government funding put into mental health support programs like Beyond Blue, Black Dog, you know, all these ones. And I haven't accessed any of them, but the ones I've seen advertised look great. You know, they look really on song. And again, posters for support in key room or easily visible. There you go, there's more.
More links. So many resources.
Yeah, and some of those links are to posters as well, just reminding people to access the mental health support.
Great.
So I suppose that's my last slide. I suppose the key message, I should have a link to my website up here, but you can see this is WI.
Go back to the very front page.
Yeah. The key message we're trying to say to people is communicate with your staff, make sure you keep up to date, make sure you follow what the government is telling you to follow, what WorkSafe is telling you to follow, because if someone dies and they've been infected through your negligence at work, like I said, what did I say, 16 million and 20 years jail?
At most, yeah.
Yeah, at the most. That's for manslaughter, that's industrial manslaughter. So, and if you're not sure, just ask or download one of those hundreds of links there and have a look. But look, I know it's time consuming. I haven't downloaded all those links. I mean, who's got time? So that's where, you know, I'm not meaning to tout, but, you know, come and ask someone who does know now, again, is now an expert in this. And if you're not sure, just ask.
Yeah, I think that is really the key takeaway from all of this, is that we all know things have changed a lot really quickly, but our tolerance for being in limbo is pretty much over. And as you said, people are getting more litigious, and I think that's now what employers particularly need to be aware of. We're not just sliding by in an emergency situation. This is now our new norm. So it is time to make sure that you are across the stuff as best you can, because ignorance is never an excuse. And even that case you talked about earlier, the one in Kilmore, unfortunately, where that person stopped at the cafe for 45 minutes, that business wasn't checking driver's licenses, wasn't checking where people were from, wasn't taking, getting people to write down their details, which could be enough if someone did catch it from there to get them in trouble.
Yeah.
That's right.
I think it would be enough, because I went to a cafe the other day and I didn't know I had to take my license, and I didn't have my license on me, and they're really strict now because they can get pinged, you know.
Yeah. So I think it's been a wake-up call, particularly that for regional businesses, because we want to protect the regions as well from not having to be locked down again. So maybe we're actually going to be potentially a step ahead of our Melbourne colleagues in that way. We certainly have a sheet that everyone needs to fill in and do a declaration and declare their address and they haven't been into contact with anyone and all of that. But what I haven't been doing is writing down temperatures. So I'm going to add that to that declaration.
Are you having people coming into the office, Jackie? Are you?
Yep.
Okay. A lot of our law firms here are closed. They're not having anyone coming in.
Yep. No, we're doing most via Zoom, but there are still people that, and again, they're our vulnerable clients too. Like, there's stuff going on in their lives that can't stop. So, yeah, with the 4 square metre rule and all of that being complied with. Absolutely.
I know. But it's really funny. Like, I thought about it the other day about even shaking people's hands. Like, that's always been disgusting when you think about it. Do you know what I mean?
What about blowing out candles on a cake?
I know. It's the things that we've done that we've taken for granted for so many years. And now you think we'll never go back to that. I don't think we'll ever go back to that.
No.
So, are there any questions in the chat, Jackie? Or does anyone have any questions?
No questions in the chat. Now's the time for questions, guys. Use the chat box if you can. I'll just check the Q&A box. There is that other box, but no one uses that. Okay, well, for those attending live, if you want to hold on for a sec, I'm going to stop the recording so that those can watch the replay. But for those live, we're going to give you the chance to come off mute. So thank you. Thank you so much, Rosa and Anne, for sharing all of that. And certainly because there's so many links in it, you definitely share the link for us for your booklet. And the other main ones was definitely the WorkSafe checklist. I think I certainly highlighted that one would be a good starting place for people.
Yeah, checklists are great.
Definitely. Great starting point.
Very good.